Oh, interesting. Silver Defender asks, was there ever any advice you were given during your career that you originally scoffed at, which turned out to be something you'd often fall back on? You know, way back in the early days of bidding on jobs, so in the beginning of my modeling career, I was modeling for other shops. I was making things for other shops. And I didn't do a lot of freelancing making of things out of my shop. And when you are beginning making things, what to charge people is one of the most difficult things to figure out. Because at the very beginning of your career, your most plentiful resource is your time. And it's the resource you can throw at the jobs that you are doing. The better you get, the more precious the resource of time becomes. And the more you want to restrict that from the job because you have other jobs to do. You can't take an unlimited amount of time to do every job, so you have to refine. And then over time, the most valuable resource the most plentiful resource becomes the materials. But at the beginning of my career, I could not afford to spend $100 on a bunch of plywood to build something on spec. I didn't have that kind of dough lying around. So I had to get other people to give me jobs to pay for that materials. Meanwhile, I'm there throwing dozens and dozens of hours building something for some small, sci-fi channel show or some theater. And so when I first started working for Jamie and then Industrial Light and Magic, I noticed they both had roughly, this is the late 90s, mid and late 90s, that they both, ILM and Jamie, had the same breakdown for bidding on something, which was to say, all right, you want to build one of these things out of brass and you want to make 20 of those. Okay, I'm looking at this. It's going to be a few $100s worth of brass. That's easy to figure out. But it's also going to be a certain amount of lathe work for each one of these. And I'm going to estimate that once I'm in production, I could probably turn out one of these every 2 hours. So if I need 20 of these, I'm going to say I could do 4 a day. It's going to be a solid week of work to turn these out. Okay, so how do you bill out a solid week of work? Well, what I noticed that Jamie would do and ILM would do is they would take every person day and add $500 to the bill. That's more than that person costs. But when you factor in shop space, the rent, the time, workman's comp, and the other aspects of supporting an employee in your shop, $500 a day at the very beginning of my career sounded like an impossible amount of money. That sounded crazy as a per day cost. And it was not even close. It was absolutely the right number. I was totally wrong. I remember specifically, I used to have a shop over down on Yosemite Street in Bayview in a place called Yosemite Place now. It used to be a mattress factory. And that was one of my first shops in San Francisco. And one of the other shops there was this wonderful carpenter named Dieter Kunhert. And Dieter came to me one day and he was like, you do some welding and I need welding of this part for a lamp. Dieter's German. And I said, yes, I can make this lamp holder for you. $200? I was thinking it would take me about a day and $200 would be pretty good pay for a day. And Dieter said, no, that is not enough. My German accent is terrible. Dieter said, no, that is not enough. The going rate on something like that is more like $600. So that's what I'll pay you. And it was a wonderful resetting of my expectations for Dieter to do. And I have since done that with others. I've gotten bids from people and said, no, that's way too low. I'm going to pay you more than that. And that is a great thing to do for a young maker, to show them a little bit of what scale is actually possible. So this is the longest way of saying that I think of that $500 per day bidding metric as a piece of advice about how to bid stuff that took me a while to come around and realize was actually quite reasonable. When I was working I did a set of micro machine prototypes for Galoob, and I did the Star Destroyer, the Snowspeeder, the TIE Bomber, and the Y-Wing Fighter. And of those, I built the Y-Wing and the TIE Bomber, and Dave Fogler did the Snowspeeder and the Star Destroyer. And Galoob was paying me $4,500 a piece for those prototypes, which sounds like a lot of dough. $4,500 a piece for 4 prototypes. Dude, that's $18,000. That sounds like a lot of money. And a month later, after Dave and I had spent like a full month making these 4 models, I just barely broke even. Yeah, that's what things cost to build. And you will confront some edge cases early in your career, and you will have to balance between this metric of it's pretty good for a day's pay. What will the market bear? And I remember being offered by a production company early on, doing an animated spot for some network, 30 seconds of animation, stop motion animation. It was within my skill set. It was within my ability to execute. And they had $3,000 to do this thing. This is like 1992. And even then I knew that was an appallingly cheap number to offer 2 dudes for 30 seconds of stop motion animation. And I just flat out refused to take it. Had a huge argument with the partner in that job who wanted to take the money. And I was like, I'm not going to do this animation for exposure. No one's ever going to look up who did this animation. Yeah, I may get my leg in with this production company, but I don't want to work with them. They're offering me like a quarter of what this would cost to do it. And I think that's morally bankrupt. Yeah. I hope that answer was somewhat useful. There are so many things you will hear early in your career that you won't understand until later in your career. There's this. There's a set of books by Carlos Castaneda, which are often thought of to be anthropology, but really they're more just lyrical analogy. They're not anthropology at all. I don't think they depict any kind of reality. But Carlos Castaneda's books are among my favorite analogies for life and creativity. And there's this point at which the teacher says to Carlos Castaneda, his Yaqui mystic Indian teacher says, "Oh, I can tell you the purpose of the universe, but you won't understand it." And he's totally right. He's totally right. Not that I understand the purpose of the universe as he was explicating it at that moment, but like, you can't understand the thing until you can understand the thing. You just have to kind of chew on a certain amount of mud to know how to bid out a job. You had to have bid on a bunch of crappy jobs. You've heard a bunch of advice that you didn't understand until it came time to realize, oh, this is the problem because I didn't take that thing into account. Yeah. Again, it's a process. It would be lovely if we could take every piece of advice we get and actually understand it right away, but that's not how we function. We are iterative. We are iterative explorers. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to support us even further, you can by becoming a tested member. Details are, of course, below, but it includes all sorts of perks, and we're building them all the time. You get advanced word and behind-the-scenes photos of some of our projects. Questions, you get to ask direct questions during my live streams, and we have some members-only videos, including the Adam real-time series of unbroken, unedited shots of me working here in the shop. They are weirdly meditative. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you on the next one.